All right. How about now? I think no.
All right.
Oh, wait, I think I hear something now.
Are you seeing the bars go up and down?
Yeah, but I'm also getting echo.
Eric, real quick.
Am I hearing echo or am I?
It seems that we have audio now.
Yeah, I think we're set. I think we're hearing.
I'm hearing an echo from this computer, but
Yeah, probably mine because I have it. I just turned on the audio so I
Okay.
can hear what they hear.
Okay.
Okay,
cool. All right.
we're good. Hey, everyone, we got it.
Yeah, okay. We probably didn't have audio from the beginning, so I'll just welcome back to the Imaging channel on this Sunday night. We are on our first Sunday schedule as we started earlier in the year. Tonight and also presenting, we had to push a talk that was going to be this week out further into the future. So I'm filling in tonight. I'm going to talk about the timely topic of comets and comet processing. So before I jump in, let me share my screen to look at the calendar upcoming. So this is on our website, the astroimagingchannel.org. You can go to the calendar tab, and this way you know which nights we're streaming and which talks you want to go to. So I'm tonight on the 21st. We have Brian Kloppenberg from the American Association of Variable Star Observers, who is going to come on and talk about an AAVSO topic. We're still honing down which one, but probably along the lines of getting involved in the citizen science and the amateur professional collaboration that the AAVSO is for. So we're going to have him on. The Christmas weekend, the 28th, we figure most people are going to be gone that weekend as opposed to the prior one. So that's going to be our Christmas bye, although we weren't going to be on that weekend anyways. And then at the beginning of January, beginning of the new year, we have Manny Lines on talking about exoplanets. So that should be fun. February 1st, we have Mike Cranfield talking about there's a new UI module for pixel math. So instead of I haven't seen it yet, but basically when you have a user interface, more buttons, less text. So this could get be an interesting way to interface with pixel math. And then, guys, we have a lot of open slots. So us both here on the channel in the room need to get to recruiting. And if you are out there in YouTube land and you have a topic you would love to share with the rest of the world about anything astrophotography, please hit the contact us button on our website and shoot us a note, and we will see if we can get you on the schedule. Anything from hardware to image capture to image processing to we've had a lot of talks this year on how to build and operate a remote observatory, which has been really cool. Really anything that's astrophotography related. And it can be a topic that we've covered in the past. It doesn't have to be a brand new topic we've never covered, because a lot of stuff needs continual updating. There's new stuff coming out all the time in PixInsight. There's new devices coming out all the time. We haven't had a lot of smart telescope stuff on here in a while. We haven't had much on the ASI Air, so we could really use some how-tos on how to get the most out of using the ASI Air, which I know a lot of you out there are using. And you don't have to be the foremost expert in that topic in order to come on and talk about it. We want to hear from real folks out there who have real experience with all facets of astrophotography, and everybody knows something that somebody else doesn't know. So please hit that contact us button, and we will get you onto our schedule. So I'll stop sharing there. All right, I think without further ado, I'll go ahead and start. So tonight's talk is going to be a little bit back and forth between a PowerPoint presentation and showing stuff live in PixInsight. So let me go ahead and share. I'll start sharing the PowerPoint here. It's this screen here. Okay, minimize that. I'm going to be turning my head to look at that screen, so don't be weirded out. Yeah, I'm going to talk about how to process comets and also a little bit about how to capture comets at the end. So there's two methodologies for capturing comets. One is to track the stars, so the way you would ordinarily do deep sky astrophotography, which has the comet moving through the frame, and then you align on the comet so that you have, instead of a comet streaking through, you can actually see your comet. And you can also double align. You can align on the stars and on the comet in order to have a still stars, still comet image.
which are something that is finally much more easy to do with StarExterminator than it used to be. Times I tried this in the past did not work. StarExterminator has changed that game. Or you can track the comet. PhD2 has a comet tracking mode, and there's a plugin for N.I.N.A called Orbitals that takes advantage of that comet tracking mode, but kind of automates it all for you. So you don't have to train PhD on the comet. You don't have to go figure out what the rates are. It does all that stuff. I'm going to talk about how to set that up at the end. All right, so first we're going to talk about the first method, which is tracking sidereally, tracking the stars like you would for any other astrophoto, and how to do a still stars, still comet image. So for this example, I'm going to use a recent image I took of Comet 2025 A6 Lemon because it is very pretty. So the pros for doing this method are you can make an image with both steady stars and steady comet, which are very pleasing to look at. And in particular, if you have some deep sky objects in there, then you can take advantage of that. And it can be easier to see the detail in the tail without that being covered up by star streaks. And you also have some flexibility because you can still make a streaked stars image if you want to, because it's kind of cool to show the comet's motion through the sky. So you don't have to make a still stars, still comet image. You can do a streaked stars, still comet image with that same data. However, you're limited in exposure time because that comet is moving through the sky. So your individual exposures have to be relatively short depending on how fast the comet is moving. And it will eventually go from one corner of your camera frame to the other corner. So you only have so much time with the comet in that particular field. And it also requires a few more processing steps in order to get that still stars, still comet image. So the particular data set I'm going to show and tell how to do was taken on my remote telescope out at Starfront Observatory. So that's a Celestron 9 1/4 Edge HD with the reducer, a ZWO 2600 monochrome, and just RGB filters. In order to make the most of the time I had with the comet, I just rotated RGB, 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 RGB in my N.I.N.A sequence. And I used N.I.N.A to capture this. And this particular image was taken on October 3rd of this past year. You can see down there, I have about 19, 20 frames each of RG and B and their 2-minute exposure time, which is relatively long for staying still on the comet. But this one wasn't moving especially fast through the field, so I was able to get away with that. And I used Sky Safari to do the framing to figure out where I wanted to center the telescope so the comet would move through the frame. All right, so let me give you a rundown of what we're going to do, and then I'll step through some of the steps. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire image processing chain because once you get through that pre-processing, like the calibration, registration, things like that, pretty much everything after you get the comet image assembled is the same as the rest of your deep sky process. You're still going to stretch, you're still going to mess with the colors, you're still going to good things with the curves and HDR and things like that. So I'm only going to focus on how to actually assemble the comet image. So you have the still stars and the still comet. So you can either do that manually using the calibration, what's the process? Image calibration process in PixInsight. And then image registration, star alignment, the name of the process. Or you can use weighted batch preprocessor, but only do the calibration and the star registration and don't do any of the integration. You can still do subframe weighting and stuff like that, but I haven't actually figured out how to use the subframe weighting from weighted batch preprocessor when you're integrating not in weighted batch preprocessor. There's supposed to be a keyword. There's not a keyword saved in the file like it's supposed to be. In any case, see, I just use weighted batch preprocessor for just the calibration and the registration for doing comet images. So when you align on the stars the way that you ordinarily would using weighted batch preprocessor or star alignment, this is what the image looks like. Put this video here. So you can see that the stars are steady and our comet is moving through. The reason why it's kind of blinking is because I'm rotating RGB, RGB, RGB for the, put that one more time, rotating through the filters. So it's kind of varying in brightness depending on which filters is currently shown there. You can see a couple satellite trails go through. So after you do the star alignment, now we'll do the comet alignment. And whether or not you're doing streaked stars or still stars, you need to align on the stars first. That's because you could take advantage of comet alignment's ability to estimate the distance between the beginning frame and the ending frame so that you don't have to go through and select the comet nucleus in every single frame. So if they're aligned on the stars, the comet moves monotonically through the image, and you only have to tell PixInsight where the comet is in the first image and the last image, and it will interpolate all the ones in between, making your life so much better. So you do need to star align first before you do comet alignment, or else you're going to have to go through and select the comet nucleus in every single frame. So after comet alignment, and I'm going to walk through in PixInsight how to do this, but I want to run down what we're doing so that you don't get lost. Start my video here. So now the stars are moving and the comet is steady. So basically we're going to have two sets of data that we're working with, the still stars data and the still comet data. And we're going to stack both of these. But before we stack the comet data, the comet aligned data, we're going to run StarExterminator so that we remove all the stars from the comet images. And this will make it a lot better for you to have a really nice comet image to go reinsert the stars from the star aligned image back onto later in the process. This will also prevent streaking artifacts from just using rejection to do this in image integration, which I'm going to end up showing later on for the comet tracking portion of this. But for the sidereal tracking portion, you can take advantage of StarExterminator at doing a better job at removing the stars than just doing rejection and image integration, which is the old way that we used to have to do it. This is not a video, it's just a single frame. This is what it looks like after you run StarExterminator. You can see it did a pretty good job of removing the stars. And then the subsequent steps that we're going to take after that is we're going to stack the starless comet frames. We're going to stack the star-aligned frames. Then we're going to extract the stars from the star-aligned stack and go plop those onto the comet stack. And then from there, you can proceed with your processing largely as normal. All right, so now I'm going to switch screens over to PixInsight here. Reopen my Meet window so I can share again my other screen. There we go. All right. So we have PixInsight here. If it's sized funny, wait a second. Linda's going to click some buttons and get PixInsight set back up nicely in the screen. Okay, so we are doing Comet Lemon. I'm only showing part of my widescreen, so you're going to see like half of a folder peeking over the top here. The folder is not the important part. The PixInsight part is. Weighted batch preprocessor. You're going to run this mostly the normal way, except you're only going to run calibrate and image registration. So just like we normally would, copy and paste this directory here. So I've got all my light frames. It's going to input this entire directory. And then I've got my calibration frames, same as normal. I've got, I'll load here in a second. I've got 3 master flats, one for blue, one for green, one for red. And then I've got my master dark, which is the same temperature and exposure time as my lights. And my flats, of course, match the filters for the lights. So I've got my darks, my flats. So I'm auto assigning those. I have mine set up where, actually that's not important for this, because if you only have one night of data, you're going to have the same temperature and the same flats. So you don't have to do the fancy stuff that I have to do with some of my other images. So in the lights tab where it lists out all of your lights, we're going to only tick image registration. You can still do local normalization. I just don't, because it's a dark sky site, so I don't really have gradients. Yes. We're not doing image integration. Don't bother with astrometric solution because we're not going to use it at this stage. You can still do linear defects correction if that's something that is normal to your process. Basically, we're just using weighted batch to do the calibration and the registration. So I'm not actually going to run this because we don't need to sit here and watch my computer run through this. So I'm going to do the thing they do on the cooking shows where you put the cookies in the oven and then you go pull the cookies out of the other oven that are already done. So exit out of here and get to my notes here. So in this particular data set, subframe selector weighted batch preprocessor did not do a good job of registering my star frames for some reason. Sometimes its settings are not the most conducive to doing Schmidt-Cassegrain stars. So I ended up having to run star alignment. I've got all my processes here on the side, but of course they're all found in processes, all processes, alphabetical order. So star alignment, I did have to run this separate from weighted batch preprocessor on the calibrated frames from WBPP because it didn't do a good job for some reason, even though the stars are pretty good in these images. So in here, and I think you can also set it in weighted batch preprocessor, I would choose a reference frame that is kind of toward the middle of your image data set so that the comet, if you set up your image so that the comet was in the middle at about halfway through the time, that way you have the most kind of screen space to work with. If you may be setting that different depending on how you framed the comet, but I would just pick one toward the middle of your imaging session. So I'm not going to load all that here because star alignment is it's the same thing you would ordinarily do. You can align all the filters together, or you can align them separately if you want to keep them in separate folders. But the important thing is, just like with all monochrome imaging, you need to align them all to the same reference frame. Now, of course, if you're using a one-shot color camera for this, which is a lot easier, then you just align all of those like you ordinarily would. So I'm talking through the monochrome stuff here, but for the one-shot color, don't forget the debayer, and you don't need to deal with the multiple filters, of course. All right. So now comet align. So comet alignment is a nifty process that's been in PixInsight for quite a while, I think, actually. And I'm going to add into here. Sorry, let me grab my folder path. I'm going to grab my star aligned images, which for me is this registered folder here. And I have them broken out in separate folders, but for sake of ease, I also just have them all together in this folder. Comet alignment, we'll put them in time order, which is important for getting the monotonic movement of the comet to line up properly. Wait for that to load. I'm using an NVMe drive, which I highly recommend. It makes processing, particularly pre-processing when you have a lot of file operations going on, much, much faster. All right, so in our comet alignment process, if your comet is moving smoothly through the image, it doesn't even have to, there can be gaps in there. It just needs to not be jumping all around so your stars are aligned. You only have to open the first and the last image. So you can hit this show first image button. Obviously, you're going to need to auto stretch it. And then zoom in and select the coma. Now, it will do a centroid estimation, so you don't have to be like exactly perfect, but the closer the better, particularly for when you've got a nice fuzzball of a coma here. So I guess I should say the center of the nucleus. So I've got it selected there. And close that. Go to show last image. Same thing. Click on the auto stretch button. Zoom in. Click the center-ish of your comet nucleus. It will estimate where it is based on its centroid. And then now these all should have the comet nucleus selected in the correct position if your comet is moving smoothly through the image. So we can open them up and check. Yep, there it is. Good job, PixInsight. And yep, here's another one. Good job, PixInsight. If for some reason it is giving you trouble with estimating where it's at, you can go reselect it in any of these frames, and it will interpolate from there forward. So you can add additional reference points to these frames through this cycle. And then select your output directory and hit execute. And it's actually a very fast process, so that this does not take long to run, but I'm not going to run it so I don't get files all mixed up here. So now we have our comet aligned images and from previously our star aligned images. So now we're going to take the comet aligned images and run them through StarExterminator. If you haven't used batch mode in StarExterminator before, I will show you how to do that now. First, we're going to untick unscreened stars because it's mainly more useful for when you have stretched data. It's more helpful in the nonlinear state if you're going to operate on those stars and bring them back in later. Otherwise, if you untick unscreened stars, then the we don't need to use it here because what unscreened stars will do is leave the background darker, which we don't need for this part of the process. Okay, so you're going to hit process batch here. I'm going to set the Starless files to go to my SXT, my StarExterminator folder here. And I'm going to untick the output star files because we're throwing those away. We're going to use the stars from the star aligned image instead. I'm not going to hit go because we also don't need to sit here and watch my computer chunk through all these frames. But you don't need to adjust any other settings and just hit select input files and execute. And so I would click this button. I would go select my comet aligned images, drop them into here, and then hit OK. And it will go through and remove all the stars from all the comet images. Now, it won't do a good job if those stars are not star-like. So as with any image process that you do, make sure you blink through your frames first and delete any ones that had bad guiding. Having gaps is not going to mess up comet alignment. So go ahead and delete those frames that have where your guiding wasn't good or a breeze came through or something like that. So you don't have any doubled stars or other weird elongated stars, streaked stars, yada, yada. All right. So at this point, we have our star-aligned data, we have our starless comet-aligned data, and we're going to stack both of those. So for this portion, you're going to use pretty much the same stack settings that you would use with any deep sky image. So I'm going to add my, let's do the comet stack first. So I'm going to add, well, I don't have this broken up by filter at the current moment, but add all my red frames, and then I would do it again for my green frames and again for my blue frames for the starless comet image. Let's see. Yeah, the normal set of settings that I usually use a subframe selector weight. Don't worry about that. Just don't care. Average, additive. I've got enough frames to do linear fit clipping. If you only have like 10 frames, you could do Windsorized Sigma clipping is good. But I don't have any particularly special settings set for the pixel rejection for because it's just what you would do for a normal deep sky image. You want to reject your satellite trails, you want to reject your hot pixels, yada yada. So that process is the same. And then I'll just show you what one of those looks like. So here's the green stacked image of our starless comet, and it looks very nice. Did a good job removing the stars. We've got some nice tail here. It's pretty cool. And then you do the same for the stars, and you're also going to not change any of your image integration settings for that either, but you'll get kind of a funny looking set of images. Let me open the stars image here. So okay, I already okay, this is the one that's the one I already extracted. Here's the stars stacked image. All right, so this is our still stars image, and you can see the comet moving through and leaving this big, nasty, weird trail thing. Not to worry, we're actually going to extract the stars from these images and leave everything else behind using StarExterminator. And that looks like this. Where you've got a nice black background here. And if you hit auto stretch, it's going to look very weird because we have very bright point sources and we have very dark background, and PixInsight doesn't really know how to stretch that to something that makes sense. So this image looks weird. Don't worry about it. It's actually fine. I promise. Okay, so now I'm going to flip back over to the PowerPoint. Stop sharing. Share my other screen. Thank you, Linda, for being so flexible on flipping back and forth between my various screens. Okay. All right, so from here, you would proceed with processing as normal. So combining the comet RGB looks like thus. Combine the stars RGB, looks like thus. Very weird looking. It's fine, I promise, don't worry. As normal, crop both of these. Run background extraction. I like to use Graxpert. This also did a first hack at the color balance. And then add stars plus Starless. And the other advantage of this methodology of having still stars, still comet, is that you can run spectrophotometric color calibration or photometric color calibration on the image with the comet in it. So you can actually correctly color the comet, which is great. You can utilize that star photometry to get the colors to be as accurate as possible. So very handy. Blur exterminator, noise exterminator, stretch. I like to use generalized hyperbolic stretch. It's by far and away the best. I'm not going to cover how to use that tonight because we don't have time. I have a video on my YouTube though, AstronoMolly images. I ran HDR, which kind of made it possible to see a little more detail inside of the coma area here. Did some curves and had a pretty nice final product. There's still some things I don't love about how this came out, but that's just some in-goodening with there's some kind of weird color here, and this turned out a little gray, but it also could just be gray because things that glow on multiple wavelengths tend to end up being white or grayish. Okay, so that is the end of the still stars, still comet section. Eric, do we have any questions? Are you there? Let's see. Okay, I'm looking at YouTube and don't see anything. Okay, cool. Don't forget to put your questions in because this is a good opportunity to get to do that live interaction as opposed to me just talking at you in some pre-recorded video. And so you can ask questions. And maybe something wasn't clear that needs to be done in the one-shot color version versus monochrome, yada, yada. So put your questions in the chat. We will get to them. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to process an image where we were tracking the comet as opposed to tracking the stars. After I get through how to do the processing of this, I will show you how to do the comet tracking in Orbitals in N.I.N.A. So for this one, we're going to do Comet 2025 K1 Atlas, which I did comet tracking on actually as more of a test to prepare for imaging Comet 3I Atlas, the interstellar comet, where I wanted to be able to take longer exposures, which you can do when you're tracking the comet. So this is a star trails, but still comet image. You can actually see that it broke up into multiple pieces, which is extremely cool. All right, pros. You can do longer exposure times because you're moving with the comet. So you're not going to blur the comet by taking longer exposure times to within the limits of your guiding. This is good for dimmer comets and for getting dimmer parts of comet tails. And you can also get more total exposure time because it will stay on the comet as it moves through the sky. So you can track it all the way across the sky if it's up all night or something like that. Instead of having to either try and chase it in chunks or do it manually, it will automatically keep up with it, which is very cool. It is the cons are it is a more complex setup. You have to use the comet tracking mode in PhD2. Fortunately, the Orbitals plugin does this all for you, but you do have to learn how to use Orbitals and do some practice runs and make sure that everything's set up to work well. And unless the comet is moving very slowly, you're going to have streaked stars, which does kind of cause some challenges for processing, as we will see. But you could also, if you wanted still stars in the image, come back to that spot or some spot along its path, take star tracked images there, and then put the two together, knowing, being truthful about where the comet actually was and not just superimposing it on an image of it flew by Andromeda or something like that. Leave that one up to you. It's also susceptible to star streak artifacts because it's really difficult to fully reject the streaked stars, since StarExterminator does not do a good job of removing stars that are not very star-like. So it can be a little bit tricky. So for this data acquisition, same telescope out at Starfront, 9.25 Edge HD with the reducer, 2600 monochrome camera. And I actually used a shorter exposure time on this, not because of the speed, but because of the fact that it's much brighter. It's a rather bright comet. I didn't want to blow out the core. So I only used 60-second exposures for this one, even though I could have gone longer if I'd wanted to. And again, I did RGB, RGB, RGB rotation. All right, so the rundown, weighted batch preprocessor. We're only going to use the calibrate mode because when you don't have star-like stars, then you can't register on them. They have to be pretty round in order for the registration algorithm to be able to pick up on them. So we're going to run weighted batch preprocessor in calibrate mode only. And yeah, so here's an example of why star registration fails. You can see that my stars are rather streaked and not at all point-like. And so PixInsight can't tell where the star is at to do the alignment. Okay, then we're going to do comet alignment. In this case, though, because we're not aligned on the stars and because the image is constantly recentering to keep the comet in the middle, we don't have that smooth monotonic motion through the image. So we're going to have to go through each of the frames and select where the comet nucleus is at whenever it does a reset. So it's a little more time intensive to go and select where the comet nucleus is at. So here's what it looks like before the comet alignment. You can see what I'm talking about, where it progresses and then it gets recentered. And it progresses and it gets recentered. So this is why we can't just use comet alignment in the beginning and end mode like we did before. And then after comet alignment, which I'll show, and I zoomed out for this video, you can see that the comet's staying very solidly in place while the stars go on by it, which is very cool. I should just also post these videos. Okay, and then we have two different stacking options here. One, you can try to reject the stars using the rejection settings in image integration to make a starless comet image that way. But this is susceptible to artifacts left behind by the rejection of those stars and can make the image kind of blotchy, have some weird stuff, which is what happened the first time I processed this. Or you can do no rejection and leave all the stars in and get that cool star streak effect. You can kind of see it moving, kind of see how far it has moved by looking at how long the star streaks are. But in order to get the stars to stay in, you have to do no rejection. I couldn't get it to work with only doing like light rejection. So you're going to get satellite trails, and you're going to get any remaining hot pixels that did not get nuked by your calibration. So I might have been able to keep my hot pixels down if like the couple that were sticking around if I had done like cosmetic correction. I've not gone back to try that, but if they're not corrected for, they will show up all over the image. I'll show you what I mean here in a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, so here's those two options. Here's the starless with the rejection, and it looks fine now. But when we get to the end, you'll start to see the issues come out. And then here's without rejection. So we have all of the star trails here, and I'm zoomed in so you can't see the satellite trails in this particular shot. But I think I've got on the next slide. Yeah, here we go. Here's those hot pixels I was talking about. So it's one hot pixel that's in slightly different places as the like now that we're aligned on the comet, that hot pixel gets marched along the image, and so I get quite a lot of those that happen to be really close to the comet, which is a bit of a bummer. Okay, back to PixInsight. 1 second. Okay, we're back to PixInsight. Same as before, weighted batch preprocessor, but in calibrate only mode. So we're going to untick that image registration box. Let me just remind you where that's at real quick. A second to open. In the lights tab, you're going to untick this image registration box because it will not work if your stars are streaked. Now, if you happen to have short enough exposures where you were tracking the comet and your stars aren't streaked, then you can maybe get away with this, but we will not be able to here. So we're running weighted batch preprocessor in calibrate only mode, just for ease of not having to go calibrate it yourself in image calibration per filter. All right, so exit that. Now, StarExterminator also does a poor job of trying to remove the stars. I did try it, and some of the images, half the stars were removed. Some of them, none of the stars were removed. It depends on the star shape for that particular image. So we can't do our fun trick of using StarExterminator to suck out those stars. Okay, so comet alignment. I do want to show you what I'm talking about with needing to select multiple frames for alignment points. So I'm going to open my, let's see, yeah. I'm going to open all of my calibrated subframes that came out of weighted batch. Why are you taking so long? While that loads, did any questions pop up? Let's see. Nope. Comet imaging is really fun. It's challenging. You get to try lots of different things. They're ephemeral. You know, they come through and then they're gone. Each one's a little bit different. Imaging Comet 3i Atlas was especially cool because, you know, it's an interstellar rock and there's been so much speculation about what it is. And then I'll have to pull it up here at some point. But the one that I took the other night, actually, you can see it has two tails now, which is extremely cool.
I have a question for
yes,
you, Molly.
Yeah.
With the version that you're working on now and your need to keep realigning because it keeps drifting back to center, is that because of dithering and then recenter after drift in N.I.N.A?
I'm not actually, I think Orbitals is commanding that. I haven't quite figured out why it resets so often, or if that's a setting that I can adjust to have it track longer and then reset. I haven't figured out yet what is commanding it to do that, because I do not have center after drift, specifically because it would be recentering every single frame if it and failing to plate solve if I had that turned on.
Okay.
So I think that's just a feature of Orbitals. I've not seen in there a place to change how often it does that. That might also just be a feature of PhD, where it goes and finds a star and kind of recenters things. I'm not certain. I only started using Orbitals recently. So hopefully I'll eventually, I'm going to do a little reading to see if I can figure out if there's a way to adjust that, because it
Molly?
was, yes.
Before you get going, if you happen to have an L mount, which are getting more and more common, you can put in the ephemerids from the online, and it will track the comet amazingly precisely, even with a 4-meter telescope.
So I can do that with the SkyX as well, but I can't automate it. I can't command the SkyX to go into comet tracking mode from N.I.N.A in the middle of the night, which is why I did it with Orbitals instead of with the SkyX. Now, if you're staying up until the wee hours of the morning and you want to do perhaps a better job of tracking the comet, you might have seen in the video that the stars were kind of bouncy. Then, and you have the SkyX or an L mount, then you might get better results with that, as far as keeping things a little more steady than using the comet tracking mode in PhD. But that requires you to stay up all night, which I used to do and I don't do anymore. Now that I'm using N.I.N.A, and I can run this automated in the middle of the night. But yes, you're right, Eric. You can also do it on some certain mounts. Okay, so if I open my first frame here, now obviously this comet has 3 portions, so I'm just going to pick the brightest and the leading one here as my alignment point, because those 3 are not moving with respect to each other over the time span of my data set here. So I'm not going to obviously go through every frame right now, but do the first frame, do the last frame, so it at least has an estimate that you can then go correct instead of having to actually go into every single frame. And open the next frame, stretch. One's already good. The next frame, stretch. That one's already good. And after a couple of these, I don't remember which one, but I get to one where it does jump. So like here, I have to go reselect it. And so it will make a new reference point here. And you'll see the thumbtack there when you've selected a new spot for the comet nucleus. And so the subsequent frames will use that as a reference to estimate the next several set of frames. So you don't have to click every single frame, but the ones where it jumps back are ones that will need to reselect it, and then it will estimate forward, reselect, estimate forward, so on and so forth. So after you select all of those, then you run comet alignment and get your comet aligned image, which looks like, well, yeah, I showed the video, and then actually, yeah, I don't want to skip ahead here. So do the comet alignment. Okay, stacking option 1, star rejection. Did I save? Of course I didn't. Okay, I've got screenshots here. Okay, so actually, no, I do have that one saved. I have one called Comet Starless Stack that is from ye olden days of needing to reject stars. And so some of the stuff up here at the top is the same, still average, still additive, still whatever you want to do with the weights. I had a small number of frames, so I did Windsorized sigma clipping, or you can do linear fit clipping if you have more frames. But importantly, let's see. Oops, sorry, I don't actually have I have this only set for Windsorized. Okay, so for Windsorized, the main setting that you're changing here is this one, sigma high. Ordinarily, that value is like, I've got it here, is like 3, but I set it to 0.4 to reject as many stars as possible. Now, you can mess with this value and see how low you can go before you start rejecting like the comet itself. But I have found 0.4 to work pretty well most of the time. Sigma low, I also have set to a slightly different value than normal, which is 2. And Windsorization cutoff, I've set to 5, which is the default, I believe. Yes, okay. And then that will get you this image here, which does look pretty good. If I do a super stretch, you can just barely see some of the brighter stars didn't get rejected. Now, it's not obvious here, but later on we will find out that this comet tail ended up kind of blotchy because of the rejected stars. So that's why the published version of this image I did was with the no rejection. So I will show you that one real quick. So for no rejection, same thing up here, average, additive, don't care, or whatever your weights, you want your weights to be. And we're just going to select no rejection. I did try messing with various settings to see if I could just reject the satellite trails and some of the hot pixels, at least the hot pixels. Satellite trails I'll keep. The hot pixels were annoying, but I couldn't find a set of settings that rejected the hot pixels and not the stars for reasons that are probably relatively obvious. Bright pixels and bright pixels. It's going to be what it is. So if we do no rejection, then we get this image. Here, so this is the green frame, and you can see, so because it did RGB rotation, there's little gaps between the stars, which will get filled in with the other 2 filters when I do RGB combination. And you can see those hot pixels I was talking about. It's really one hot pixel that just gets moved around as the comet is tracked. And there's another one over here. So maybe somebody out there knows of a setting that can focus on those. But I think if I just did a good cosmetic correction earlier on, or maybe I need new darks, those might not show up. Okay, so there's that one. And then I think that's it for the tutorial part. Yes, okay. So now I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint for the rest of the slides that I have. Okay. All right, so again, proceed with processing as normal after doing those weird steps. So you're still going to combine RGB. I'm going to show here the Starless and the non-rejected versions, so you can kind of see how those came out. So the raw RGB combined, there's always one that's brighter than the others. It turned out to be blue in this case. Crop, background extraction, which is a pretty good job of a first hack at color calibration, like I mentioned earlier. Now, because you don't have stars to do photometric color calibration, spectrophotometric color calibration, you have to do a different method that's not dependent on the stars. So kind of dig back into your ye old PixInsight methods before we had the photometric color calibration tools. I found background neutralization to work pretty well. And for that, I use the whole image as the target image. And then for the background reference, I make a preview of some part of the background that is nice and empty. You can also do manual color calibration. You can run the color calibration process. There's a multitude of different ways to do this that don't rely on the stars. You'll have to find one that works, but I used to use background neutralization before we had the star-based tools, so I just used that here. Blur Exterminator, which does work even when you don't have stars. It does better if you have stars, but it will still work anyways. It will estimate the point spread function based on the image data. So you can see how with Blur Exterminator, it actually did a pretty nice job. You can see those all three of those fragments quite nicely. And the Noise Exterminator. And it's after Noise Exterminator that you start to be able to see some of the blotchiness. And in case you're wondering if it was Noise Exterminator that caused this, it's not. It's just revealing it now. I did try going through without Noise Exterminator, and it was still apparent at the end that you had blotchiness from the removed stars. Stretch, curves, and here's my final starless image. The blotchiness, I don't know how well it's coming through, but it looks kind of like a bad JPEG, basically. So if it looks weird and blotchy, it's because it actually is. It's not just your internet connection. You can kind of see that a little better here. And the nice thing with an image like this where you keep the stars in is that any artifacts like that are less obvious. We also don't have them because we did not remove the stars here. So zoom in here, we have a nice smooth tail. And this is how I knew that it wasn't, that effect wasn't real. I was looking at this image and seeing how nice and smooth that tail is. And also how I knew it wasn't Noise Exterminator's fault, because we do not have the blotchiness here when I ran Noise Exterminator. Okay, we're almost done. Let me talk about the Orbitals plugin. I'm not going to open N.I.N.A to go through how to set it up because all my telescopes are currently running. But I have a series of screenshots that will probably be easier to understand anyways. Okay, so Orbitals is a plugin. So when you're in N.I.N.A, go to the list of plugins. You can install it like you would the rest of them. And then it will create a tab in your main imaging area called Orbitals. It'll be a nice long list of tabs that you probably have down there. So you click on that tab, and this is where you're going to load your catalog. There's a couple options. There's JPL, there's another catalog option. I had to use the other one in order to get the interstellar comet, and I had to use its original designator, N1 Atlas, as opposed to 3i Atlas. So keep in mind that some comets have multiple designators. If one doesn't work, try the other. It also has asteroids, and you can also track the James Webb Space Telescope if you have a big enough telescope to still see now that it is quite dim. Also, you can use this for solar system bodies as well, but I don't do planetary imaging in N.I.N.A because it's a lot easier to do in a Sharpcat. Okay, so yeah, you're gonna click on this down arrow and select Comet. You can also put in manual TLEs, which is 2-line elements. It's the ephemerids of the objects. So select comet, start typing, and this little drop down will appear just like it does in the framing wizard and other places in N.I.N.A. Now that comet K1 is broken up, then you can select A, B, or C, but they're right next to each other, so it doesn't matter. And then it will show you where it's at on the sky. And if you have a horizon loaded, it will show you where it's at with your horizon. It's very handy. Shows you where it's at in the sky. It gives you a suggestion for max exposure, but I don't. It has much shorter exposures than you really need for that max exposure. I don't think it takes into account what your focal length is and how long it takes to actually see movement at whatever focal length you're at. You can also in another spot set an offset. So if you don't want it to be in the very center, you can set an offset in RA and DEC. This can take a little bit of trial and error, but you can set that if you don't want it centered. Also use a framing tool in N.I.N.A if you are trying to frame it with like another object, but it doesn't show the comet in the image, of course, because it's not in the NASA, etc. imagery that is in N.I.N.A. Okay, in your sequence, you're going to scroll up to the top and choose the orbital object sequence instruction set and plop that into your sequence. And so it looks like other objects, like other instruction sets, but with this section up here where you go and select the comet that you selected over on the main tab. It loads it here again. That drop down there. There's a couple things you need to put into this sequence in order for it to do the things that you want, which is do the comet tracking. Because you can have it just slew there also. You can use this to slew it to the comet but not track it. But I'm showing you in this instance how to use this object sequence to track it. So in the instructions, before you get to the imaging section, I have slew and center, don't forget that. Set telescope tracking rate and set guider shift rate. So I have this instruction in here. It doesn't actually work on any of the mounts I've tried it on, but it doesn't matter because you're having PhD do the comet tracking anyways. Even though I'm using a Paramount, I don't think that's an instruction that the SkyX can take from another app. So it just still stays on Sidereal tracking. And then below that, my next instruction is a sequential instruction set where I do the actual imaging. So set telescope tracking rate, set guider shift rate in the triggers. So this messed me up the first time. The first time I did this, it got the comet centered, but it didn't keep up with it. So let's see, what had happened exactly? It like the comet started, it wasn't tracking at the comet correct speed anymore. It was like tracking at a different speed than the comet was actually going. So I'll show you where these commands are at. We have to add the triggers of set telescope tracking rate and the trigger for set guider shift rate as triggers in your imaging circle here. I do 111, RGB, RGB, RGB. At the bottom here, I have stop guider track shift, because if I want to do another target after this, then I want to turn off the PhD tracking. Okay, so the set guider shift rate instruction is under guider, and the instruction for set telescope tracking rate is under telescope. And the triggers that I already mentioned, those are also set guider shift rate with the lightning bolt. That's the trigger under guider, and the lightning bolt tracking rate under telescope. And so that in the triggers is what keeps it up to date with where it's at, and continues to have that rate be sent correctly to PhD. Now, it commands PhD, so you don't have to go into PhD to set this, but I want to show you what it's doing. So if you go to Tools and then Comet Tracking, then it opens up this Comet Tracking menu. And if you can do Comet Tracking manually by either punching in the rates or by doing this rate training down here. You don't need to do any of this. You don't even need to hit enable, because Orbitals will command PhD to do it will turn on, it will enable it, it will put in the rates, it will get everything set up. You can go look at that though while it's running, which is fun. I'm just didn't have a screenshot of that, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, so that is everything. So we went through how to process an image where the stars were tracked. So a still stars, still comet image. You can still make a still comet streaked stars image from that data. We process an image where we tracked the comet, where we have a still comet streaked stars image, or you can try and reject the stars. And then I showed you how to use the Orbitals plugin for N.I.N.A. And this allows you to put it in your sequence and have it run automatically during the night. So you don't have to get up and tell it to slew to the comet or anything like that. Very handy. Okay, that is it. Did we get questions?
Take another look.
There was one question about from Bill Beecher about used dithering. I think he was, I'm not sure the context when it came in.
So for the comet tracking mode, you don't need to dither because you're already moving.
Yeah.
Dithering prevents your noise pixels from ending up in the same exact spot in every frame. If you're sidereal tracking, you still want to dither like you would.
Molly, you had
Yes.
a hot pixel in a CMOS camera? I've never seen that.
I see them all the time. Yeah.
Really?
They're just, they're not as obvious, I think in part because the pixels are smaller and the images are bigger than they used to be.
Actually, Tim and I have used one cheat in imaging comets. You get an image of the comet, a starless image, as you described. You wait till the next day, you go to the same star field and you take a nice star image.
Yeah.
And then you just put the comet where you knew it was, but not on the same day.
Yeah. It's like I mentioned earlier. That's the other way you can get still stars in your images is to do that as well. It can even be that same night if you want. Well,
then you get a full frame and you're not worrying about the comet. So you get a full frame with the comet in it.
Yeah. Yes, you can revisit the spot, which is what I did for, I don't remember which comet it was, but there was actually I think it was also Lemon, went by the Eagle Nebula. And I just revisited the Eagle the next night and did it in H alpha so that I could get a nice shot of it and popped it right on top where it was when it passed by.
Yeah, sure. When a comet is going through a target that you would like to have it next to, but you're not there to take that image, you can put it back.
Yep. Okay, what else? Any questions from the room? Right. Well, cool. Check YouTube one more time. Nope, we're good. Okay. We'll be back week after next on the 21st with Brian Kloppenberg talking about the AAVSO, which I'm on the board for and do a lot of imaging for. I do variable star photometry, submit those to AAVSO, and that data can get used by professional astronomers to complement professional observations and also to fill in the gaps where it's hard to get time on the big telescopes, so we can help fill the gaps, which is really cool. So we'll be back on the 21st, and the astroimagingchannel.org. Contact us if you have a talk idea you'd like to give, or if you know somebody who you think would give a great talk. You can also drop me a line and drop me their email address, and I can reach out to them as well, or one of us here. Okay. I think with that, we will call tonight. Good night, everybody.
Good night, all.
See you in a couple weeks.